Hello and welcome to Torah Thoughts. I want to start off first of all by wishing everyone a belated Yom HaAtzmaut. Yesterday, Wednesday, the fifth day of Iyar, was Yom HaAtzmaut, the anniversary of the return of Jewish independence in the land of Israel. And I want to point out that this is more than simply an Independence Day holiday similar to July 4th and what pretty much every other country has on the anniversary of their independence. For us, it's more of a religious thing because the very fact that we have come back to Israel and the very fact that we have regained our independence in that land is nothing short of a miracle. It's something that we have been praying for 2,000 years. It's something that nobody believed would ever happen. I mean, how is it possible that a nation that had been scattered throughout the world for 2,000 years without a country, without rights, without even, in many cases, not even being considered a human being. People so weak and so not in control of their day-to-day, what happens to them on a day-to-day basis, should come back and build a country, and not only build a country, but a powerful country, a successful country, economically, militarily, with respect to science and technology, in all aspects. That is nothing short of a miracle. It's what we've been praying for, and this is something where we thank God, we thank Hashem for bringing us back. I want to point out that we just recently had the holiday of Pesach, obviously, and it says in the Torah with respect to Pesach, it says HaChodesh Hazeh Lechem Rosh Chodashim. This month, the month that Pesach takes place in, will be it means the first month. So it's kind of an interesting thing in the Jewish calendar. The first month doesn't take place at the time that the year, that the new year comes. The new year is the month of Tishrei, but if you look at a calendar, the first month in the calendar is the month of Nisan because the Torah simply says so. But it doesn't say the first month. It says Rosh Chodashim. It is the head of the months. And it's interesting that, as it turns out, it is the head of the months in the sense that the schedule of the calendar conforms with what takes place on Pesach. What do I mean by that? If you take, that the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, each letter has a numerical value. So Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, Gimel is 3, and so on. And if you take the letters that correspond to the days of the holiday of Pesach, so the first day of Pesach, say you assign the letter Aleph to that, the letter Bet to the second day of Pesach, and so on. And now match that up with the last letter of the alphabet and the second to the last letter, and so on. So you'd match up the Aleph with the Taf, the last letter, the Bet with the Shin, the Gimel with the Resh, and so on. You get 7 pairings of letters: Aleph Taf, Bet Shin, Gimel Resh, Daled Kuf, Hey Tzadik, Vav with the Pei, and Zayin with the Ayin. And now what you do is, if you take a look at those letters, you find something very interesting. Aleph, the first day of Pesach, you match that up with the letter of Taf, and there's, not a holiday, there's a day in the Jewish calendar that starts with the letter Taf, Tisha B'Av. And Tisha B'Av happens to be, every year, on the same day of the week that the first day of Pesach. Bet, second day of Pesach. Shin, Shavuot. The holiday of Shavuot always winds up on the same day of the week as the second day of Pesach. Gimel, the third day of Pesach, corresponds with Resh, Rosh Hashanah, same day of the week as the third day of Pesach. Daled, the fourth day of Pesach, Kuf, Kriyat HaTorah, Simchas Torah, which incidentally only takes place outside of Israel. In Israel, the holiday of Simchas Torah is combined with the holiday of Shmini Atzeret. But outside of Israel, there's a holiday, Simchas Torah, right? That's the last day of the Sukkot holiday. It's actually 2 separate holidays, but the last day is where we celebrate the completion of the reading, the cycle of the reading, the parsha of the week that we do, right? And that corresponds, Kuf, Kriyat HaTorah, corresponds with the fourth day of Pesach. Hey corresponds with the letter Tzadik. Fifth day of Pesach corresponds with the holiday of Tzom Kippurim, Yom Kippur. And Vav, the sixth day of Pesach, corresponds with Pei, the Purim that took place right before Pesach. So all of that is an amazing little tidbit But what people always wondered was, how about Zion, the seventh day of Pesach? What does that correspond with respect to the letter Ayin? Is there a Hebrew holiday, a Jewish holiday, that starts with the letter Ayin? And if there is one, does the day of the week that holiday takes place correspond with the seventh day of Pesach? Well, there never was one until 72 years ago. With the return of Jewish control in the land of Israel, Ayin, Atzmaut. And sure enough, the seventh day of Pesach corresponds with the day of the week. By day of the week, it corresponds with Yom HaTzmaut. So this week, Yom HaTzmaut was on a Wednesday, and sure enough, the seventh day of Pesach this year was on a Wednesday. So certainly we see that Yom HaTzmaut, it falls in with the scheme of things just like all the other Jewish holidays. And the reason why I say holiday, like I said, Tisha B'Av is not a holiday, but we know that when Mashiach comes, Tisha B'Av will be a holiday. So anyway, I just want to add that. Happy Chag Sameach, happy Yom HaTzmaut to everybody, a belated happy Yom HaTzmaut. And now on to the Parsha of the week. So this week's Parsha, the portion of the Torah that we read this week, is actually two portions. Achrei Mot and Kedoshim. Now I want to give a quick explanation of why, for those of you who don't know, why do we sometimes have two portions within 1 week? Well, the Jewish calendar is shorter than the Gregorian calendar. The Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar, and the Gregorian calendar is a solar calendar. So, in order for a year to actually take place a year, the concept of 1 year has to do with the Earth revolving around the sun, right? So, in order for that to correspond, every so often, a month is added as a leap year. A month is added to the Jewish calendar, and that means that there are different numbers of weeks within a year in the Jewish calendar, depending on whether or not it's a leap year. So that means also the amount of portions in the Torah is flexible, because on some years we have more weeks, and some years we have less. So this year, for example, we don't have a leap year, which means some of those portions get combined. And this week is one of those cases. So we have two portions that we read, Achrei Mot and Kedoshim. So the meaning of Achrei Mot means after the death. It says, V'daber Hashem el Moshe Achrei Mot b'nei Aharon. This is after 2 weeks ago we read about how Aharon's high priest, his sons Nadav and Avihu, died. And this conversation between Hashem, between God and Moshe, takes place after their death. And the following parsha is Kedoshim, which means holy. Kedoshim to you. God is commanding us to be holy. Now, there is a correlation between the two parashot. First of all, as we'll see in a few minutes, a lot of the commandments that are given in Parshat Achrei Mot are repeated in Parshat Kedoshim. So they're actually kind of like sister parshas, if you will. And also, Achrei Mot opens up with the commandments regarding the process of Yom Kippur. What the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, is supposed to do, the whole procedure that he does inside the Holy of Holies in the temple, and so forth. And it's obviously the holiest, Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year. And then, of course, the next parsha tells us that we, Kedoshim to you, we are commanded to be holy, because God has chosen us as His holy nation. And then comes all the laws about what sanctifies us, what we need to do to sanctify our position in the scheme of the universe, basically. So anyway, I want to address the parshas themselves, but before I do that, there's something very important that's just sticking in my throat that needs to be addressed, and it may not necessarily have something to do with this parsha, but as a Jew, any Jew should be concerned about this. As I said, Achrei Mot, Kedoshim, the parsha that comes next week is called Emor. And why is that interesting? Well, there's a little bit of a, I guess you can call it a proverb or an adage. Achrei Mot, Kedoshim, Emor, which means, I mean, that's the sequence of those three parshas. Achrei Mot, after the death. Kedoshim, holy. Emor, say. Meaning that after someone dies, we should say something good about them. We should say that they were holy. And that's kind of like a common sense tradition. You know, when someone dies, you don't besmirch him and say bad things about him. But it also alludes to when a person dies, what do you do at the funeral? You give a eulogy. Sadly, we've been seeing a lot of funerals, not many eulogies. Unfortunately, funerals with social distancing and all that are kind of very unusual, very complicated. But No question about it. The sequence of these 3 weeks, these three parshas, Achrei Mot, Kedoshim, and more, ties in very much with how you treat a person when they die. And this week there was a funeral that took place, I believe it was in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. It's an enclave of Hasidic Jews. And sadly, in Williamsburg, in many Jewish areas, many Jews, many religious Jews, observant Jews, have not been adhering to the concept of social distancing. They've kept their synagogues open. In some cases, they took some time to close their schools. And as a fellow Jew, yes, that upsets me. And I've been speaking about this because it endangers them. And sadly, we've had so many funerals within the Jewish community, especially within those communities that didn't adhere to it. And it upsets me. In this particular funeral, though, they made every attempt to adhere to the social distancing concept. They coordinated with the city, they coordinated with the police, and the plan was to have the van with the coffin drive down a main street and to announce to the people to stand on that street if they want to pay their respects. It was a big rabbi who had died. To pay their respects by standing on the street and observing, 6 feet, distancing, face masks, and so on, as the funeral the procession drives by. And they coordinated this with the police. The plan was to have the streets barricaded. And at the last minute, the mayor changed his mind. And he sent the police in to shove everyone off the street. It turned into a whole big chaotic situation. And then the mayor then went on Twitter, I believe it was, or some other social media, calling out the Jews. Literally said, "This is my message to the Jewish communities. No more warnings and so on. And, we're going to put an end. Lives are at stake." And there's this huge rift now going on between the mayor, the police, and the Hasidic communities. And today, Thursday, police were sent out in all the Hasidic communities, giving out $1,000 fines to anyone seen in the street walking without a mask. Now, I know they said you have to wear a mask. Okay? I wear a mask whenever I go on the street. I try not to. When I do go on the street, yes, I wear a mask. But if there's no one around you and you're not wearing a mask, I think there are many people who are doing that. In fact, we're told to go outside and get some fresh air, get some exercise. You're going to jog 10 miles, 5 miles, whatever it is, with a mask on? When you're between people, yes, you should have a mask. And if you don't have a mask, shame on you. If you could have gotten one and you didn't wear one. But $1,000 fine. Have they done that in the Bronx? Have they done that in the West Side? Have they done that in other neighborhoods, non-Jewish neighborhoods? They sent out a massive police, and by coincidence, it was all Jewish neighborhoods. They came to synagogues where the doors were found open. Now, mind you, a synagogue is a building. I belong to a synagogue, and the rabbi of that synagogue, I'm pretty certain, goes in and out of the building. It's not a poisoned building. You're just not allowed to hold large gatherings that you typically would in a synagogue. Well, they gave out tremendous amounts of fines to synagogues that they found that were open and so on. And I want to point out that even though it upsets me whenever my own people don't observe the social distancing, and like I said, I've spoken about it plenty of times, they're not the only ones who are doing it. People in all neighborhoods, there's pictures all over the internet, people are gathering with crowds. I've seen it myself. When I have to visit my office, walking from the car to the office, I have to zigzag across the street to avoid crowds because I don't want to walk near anybody. But there are crowds in the street. For crying out loud, the subways are filled with people. And what did the city do to prevent crowding in the subways? They did nothing. In fact, they increased the crowding. They reduced the subway cars. So they're so worried that people are going to gather for 3 minutes to stand on the side of a road while their rabbi's procession goes by? You're sending people to their death in subway cars that are packed more than normal, more than they would have been if you would have kept the subways in the same numbers that they were. But no, you pulled the subway cars out of service, whether it was to save money or whether it's because you want a crisis. I don't know what it is, but the nerve of a mayor or a governor to criticize any community, let alone call out the one community that's being scapegoated the most on this issue. But any community, for not observing social distancing when you're not observing it, When you're causing congestions of people, and in other situations, they allow it. There are people now that things are getting better, the weather's getting nicer. They announce that they're going to be going around the parks, and when they see people gathering in the parks, they're not going to disperse them. They're going to give them masks. Meaning they're not going to give them $1,000 fines either. They're going to distribute masks. Whereas they went to Williamsburg and Borough Park and gave out $1,000 fines. And I read one of those tickets. You know what the violation is? Disobeying the mayor's executive order. Now, I grew up in America. And from everything I know growing up in America, there's nothing in the Constitution that says that the Bill of Rights is suspended if you disobeyed a mayor's order. But so it goes. Yesterday, they had the Blue Angels, the U.S. Navy's Blue Angels and the Air Force's Thunderbirds did flyovers all across New York City. I think they continued on to the rest of the United States. And people were told to come outside and watch them. The crowds in the Brooklyn Promenade, you couldn't walk through there without rubbing against someone else's shoulders. There were no police there arresting anybody. Nobody came there to disperse them. They just plain allowed it. In the parks, on the promenades, in the streets, along the all areas where people were able to gather near the Hudson River. But when the Jews did a funeral for their rabbi, that's what bothered him. There was a send-off for the hospital ship, the USNS Comfort, which, by the way, Cuomo was yelling, "Oh my God, we need a ship. The government's not doing enough. We need help for the hospital spaces." And they sent in a ship which didn't end up getting used. But never mind that. When that ship was left because it wasn't being used, they had a send-off to the ship, and crowds gathered to applaud the ship as it was being sent off. That's okay because you see, it wasn't Hasidic Jews, and it wasn't a synagogue. When they have parades here to honor the healthcare workers, and God bless them, those are our frontline soldiers right now. And when they had parades to honor them, people came out to participate in honoring those healthcare workers, but they weren't social distancing. Now, absolutely, these people deserve credit, and it's a beautiful thing what they do when the fire trucks and police cars or what have you, when they do those parades and they set off their sirens to honor the healthcare workers. But people come out on the streets to participate, and they're gathered in clusters, and nobody stops them. Now, whether it's right or wrong, one thing that they shouldn't do is a double standard. And we see here, history hasn't changed. Just like always, the Jews are the scapegoats. No different than the Black Plague. No different than any other time. As Rabbi Kahana said, when things are good, people hate Jews quietly. When things are bad, people hate Jews openly. And I'm sorry that I had to digress to this, but this is something that I don't think any Jew who cares about his fellow Jews can keep quiet about. And I'm going to come back. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this in a minute. I'm going to come back to it. But I want to move on to the particular parsha. We see in Parshat Achrei Mot another indication that God wrote the Torah and God knows science. And we see that because the Torah tells us not to drink blood. Okay, but what's the reason why we shouldn't drink blood? So the Torah tells us because the life is in the blood. Amazing thing. So it says, Ki nefesh kol basar, and it's repeated a few times in both parshas, by the way. But I'm going to go specifically to Achrei Mot. It's Yud Zayin, Perek Yud Zayin, Pasuk Yud Daled. So that's chapter 17, verse 14, and it says, because the life of all flesh, Ki nefesh kol basar, damo b'nafshohu. The life of all flesh, the blood is its life. V'omar l'bnei Yisrael, and tell the nation of Israel, dam kol basar lo tochelu. Do not eat the blood of any flesh. Ki nefesh kol basar damo. Because the life of all flesh is its blood. That's where the life is. Now, the interesting question is, if blood means life, it should be a positive thing. Why are we not allowed to drink blood? Because the life is in the blood. I get it. As a Jew, God gave us a law, we call it a chok, and we don't question it. But when the Torah gives us the reason seems kind of counterintuitive. If that's the reason, we should be drinking blood, no? Because there's life in it. Well, in modern times, we see things a bit better. In modern times, we know that life, with respect to how it affects us, isn't always good. Because life sometimes also means bacteria. It means viruses. The Torah is telling us that stuff that can harm you can only live in the blood. And lo and behold, what did they say about the coronavirus? If you find it on a cardboard box or on a metal surface, it lasts for a certain amount of time. It varies depending on the material of the surface, but it dies. Where does it stay alive? In your blood. If a person coughs or sneezes, once it exits the body, it begins to die. Ki nefesh kol basar damo b'nafsho. This is something that only God could have known 3,300 years ago. Anyway, so again, moving beyond that, I want to go to a portion of the of Parshat Achrei Mot. It's chapter 18, Yudchet, verses 2 to 5, pasuk bet to pasuk hey, and I'm just going to read it verbatim. So it says, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amata aleim ani Hashem Elokechem. It starts off saying, speak to the nation of Israel and tell them, I am Hashem, your God. What's the point of that? And then now we're gonna get the commandment. But the point of it is, why are we keeping those commandments? Because I'm your God. God is telling us that's the reason to keep the commandment, because I'm your God. Now, what is the specific commandment that He's telling us? It says, "Kamaseh Mitzrayim asher yashavtem ba," according to the practices of Egypt. Kamaseh Eretz Mitzrayim, according to the practices of the land of Egypt, asher yashavtem ba, where you stayed, where you lived. Lo ta'asu, you shall not do v'kamaseh Eretz Canaan, and according to the practices of the land of Canaan, which today is Israel. Asher ani mevi etchem shama, which I'm bringing you there. Lo ta'asu, you should not do. U'b'chukotehem lo telchu, and do not walk according to their statutes or according to their traditions, depending on the translation. Basically saying, don't behave like the nations where you come from and the nations where you're gonna, who live in the area where you're gonna go to now. Et mishpatai ta'asu, you should carry out my judgments. Ve'et chukotai tishmeru, and you should safeguard my statutes. Alechet b'hem, to walk in its ways. Ani Hashem Elokechem, I am Hashem your God. God tells us, don't follow what others tell you, you follow what the Torah tells you. And that's very important. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Ushmatem et chukotai, and you should safeguard my statutes, et mishpatai. So it's repeating it again. You should safeguard my statutes and my judgments. Asher yaseh otam ha'adam, which every man shall do. V'chai bahem, and you shall live by them. Ani Hashem, I am God. Now, the Gemara, the sages who study the meanings of Torah, explains to us v'chai bahem, and you shall live by them, means you shall live by these statutes and not die by them. From there, we see that if your life is at stake, you are not required to obey a law in the Torah if it'll cost you your life. There are few exceptions, though, but generally speaking, the Chai Bahem teaches us that. So, what am I trying to bring out with this? We close our synagogues, and again, I've been very critical of people who didn't. We close the yeshivas. We avoid weddings. A wedding is a huge mitzvah. We avoid going to weddings, funerals even, which is a big mitzvah. Why? Because the Torah commands us to safeguard our well-being, to watch out for our safety. V'chai b'hem. Not because de Blasio told us or Cuomo told us to shut the shul. If the Torah commanded us to keep the synagogue open, in such a case, we'd keep it open. And the reason I keep saying we got to close the synagogues, you shouldn't go to it, is not, well, sure, it makes sense when they tell us when they give us these directives. But the reason why we have to do it is because it's a mitzvah. Because the Torah told us that when lives are at stake, don't go to shul. When lives are at stake, don't make a wedding. De Blasio and Cuomo don't have the authority to tell us otherwise. Now, we Jews came to America, right? We have scattered all over the world, and we were stepped on. There is no boot in any country. There's no country who hasn't had its boot on our throat. We escaped persecution and came to America because in America, there's a constitution. In America, there's a Bill of Rights. And we thrived in America because this Bill of Rights allows us to worship in accordance with the Torah. And those rights are sacrosanct. And because America affords those rights, that's why America is blessed. So to be clear, we don't follow the Torah because it conforms with secular law. We follow secular laws because and only if it conforms with the Torah. And if there's ever a contradiction between the law set by man and the Torah, we follow the Torah and make no apologies for that. Secular laws don't always conform with the Torah. And we see that in this particular parsha. Right? We see it, and I'm going to address some of the secular laws now. It appears in Achrei Mot, and again repeated in Kedoshim. Right? But let's talk about, first of all, it discusses the laws of incest. Now, incest happens to be illegal in America. Who knows? Maybe one day it won't. We obey the laws that are in the Torah because they're in the Torah. Sleeping with another man's wife. I know, nowadays it's not a nice thing. Okay? Society almost accepts those kind of things. Alright? How many couples haven't cheated, right? No, the Torah tells us that a man who sleeps with another man's wife, both of them are liable for death penalty. And you know what else? Now that's at least is frowned upon still. People do, it's frowned upon. Homosexuality. Oh, I know. You're a bigot. If you don't accept homosexuality, well, guess what? Too bad. That contradicts the Torah. All right? I'm going to go to chapter 18, Yud Chet, verse 22, Chav Bet, which tells us very clearly. It says, "Ve'et zachar lo tishkav nishkaveh isha to'evahu." A man shall not lie in the way he lies with a woman. It's an abomination. It's an abhorrence. And then it's repeated again in Parsha Kedoshim. We got verse 20, which is chapter 20, Chav, verse 13, Pasuk Yud Gimel. Ve'ish asher yishkav et zachar. And a man who lies with a man, mishkaveh isha, the way one would lie with a woman, to'eva, it is an abomination. To'eva asu, it says to'eva asu. They committed an abomination. Shnehem, I'm getting out of context. Ve'ish asher yishkav et zachar, mishkaveh isha. A man who will lie with a man the way one would lie with a woman. To'eva asu shnehem. They both committed an abomination. Mot yumatu. They shall die. This is the Torah. This is not me. The mayhem bam, and their blood is upon them. The Torah is very clear. We do not accept something because society said we have to accept it. Now, can I stop someone from violating the Torah? No. Just like I can't stop a Jew from eating pork, I can't stop someone from doing that. But to accept it? Because I have to be embarrassed because someone is going to say that I'm prejudiced or bigoted or whatever. No, I'm sorry. The Torah says what it says. Same thing with bestiality, which I have a feeling one day they're going to, who knows. But the point being, God's law supersedes society's laws. And that's what the Torah is teaching us here. Right? And in Kedoshim it goes even further. It says to obey your parents, but keep my Shabbat. Why? Because God's law also supersedes your parents. We all know, respect your parents. That's a very and thank God it is an important thing in American society. But God's law supersedes them also. And the Torah goes on to tell us this is all about what? We obey God because He wants us to sanctify the position that He gave us. And it says this is very important in Perek Chaf, chapter 20, Pasuk Chavav, verse 26. V'hayitem li kedoshim Ki kadosh ani Hashem. You shall be holy to me because I, God, am holy. Pay attention. Pay close attention to this. Va'avdel etchem min ha'amim liyot li. And I have distinguished you. I have set you apart from the other nations to be mine. I know. That's something that people are not allowed to say. Oh my God, you think you're special? You think you're chosen? Well, let me quote what Rashi quoted what famous rabbi, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, said in the Talmud about this. Okay, he says as follows: from where do we know that one shouldn't say, "My soul loathes pork, I hate pork," or "I have no desire to wear clothes which is a mixture of wool and linen"? You know, according to the Torah, we're not allowed to wear clothing that have a mixture of wool and linen. I hate pork. I don't want to wear clothing with wool and linen. Where do we know that you're not supposed to say that? Rather, you're supposed to say, I would love to have those things. I would love to eat some bacon. But I can't because my Father in heaven imposed these commandments on me. So from where do we know that we're supposed to look at it that way? Because it says, I have separated you from all the peoples to be mine. God set us aside. He gave us commandments. From where do we know that we're supposed, and again, applying that, from where do we know that we're supposed to close a synagogue when lives are at stake? Because God said so. From where do we know that we're supposed to avoid funerals, even though it's a mitzvah to escort the dead, the deceased to their grave? From where do we know that we're supposed to avoid funerals when it's a danger? Because God said so. We're His people and we obey Him, not de Blasio, not Andrew Cuomo. To be clear, we don't follow the Torah. I'm going to repeat this. We don't follow the Torah because it conforms with secular law. We follow secular law because and only if it conforms with the Torah. And if there's ever a contradiction, the Torah wins. Do we think we're different? Yes. Every believing Jew, if you believe what the Torah says, yes, we are different. Do we believe we're chosen? Yes. Do we make apologies for that? No. And do people hate us for that? Absolutely. But that's too bad. Kedoshim to you. God commanded us. And we're commanded to be holy to Him. It's not an easy task, but it's our task. And that's my Torah thought. What's yours? Thank you for watching. Again, a belated Yom Ha'atzmaut Sameach and Shabbat Shalom.